Good morning! It's day 17, the 17th of December. How crazy! Today, I am going to show you some techniques for aging paper. Now, you can use these papers for writing on, sending letters to your friends, writing very, very important treaties on. You can use them for making books. Really, the world is your oyster with this paper, but I'm going to show you some techniques for making it look fancy. Or really old also. First, we are going to need to go and boil the kettle. Okay, so here we are. We've got a cup of tea and a cup of coffee. Very, very strong cup of tea and a cup of coffee. Actually, it's pretty a normal strength cup of coffee, but really it is your preference. I'm going to show you the difference. There's not an awful lot of difference between the coffee stain and the tea stain. I think tea comes out a little softer than the coffee. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a paintbrush. I've got these big chonkers, and what we're going to do is quite simply, we're going to paint it with these and make sure that it's all covered. We're going to start with tea. Right, dip it in. Just quite simply, you're just painting your paper. And the more you soak it through, the better. There's your basic tea and coffee stain. That's kind of the basic part of the video done. I mean, it's up to you to decide which one's your favourite. I quite like the little chunky bits that come out in the coffee. They kind of leave a nicer, they kind of spread and make like little natural pock marks in the paper. It's quite nice. But the tea has a much smoother, kind of more parchment-esque look about it. Really is your choice. What I'm going to do is I am going to cook these in the oven to dry them out quick, and then we're going to do exactly the same on the back to make sure that the back is covered too.
What temperature and how long for?
You probably want them to be in quite a low temperature. I'd say maybe like 100 degrees, maybe 150, because you don't want to burn the paper. So here we go. First two sheets are dry. We've got the tea and the coffee. Next, we're going to want to cover the very, very plain back sides. How exciting! Let's do it. When you're doing this, you kind of want the paper to be dry enough that when you lift it, all your tea and coffee doesn't just fall off like that. Then you want to put it on your tea tray or start on it with a hairdryer, whatever you've chosen to do. You could also just leave these to naturally dry on the floor. That is also another option that you could do. If you let the tea kind of pool on the paper as it is drying like this, we've got little puddles of tea. Those parts are going to show up darker when it's dry. And the same goes for the coffee, obviously. This is the tea paper and this is the coffee paper. You can tell from the smell. This one smells like lack of sleep. And this one also smells of lack of sleep. What I like about aging paper like this is I like all these little strange bits you get where the tea pools and the coffee pools and the little coffee grinds sit on the paper for too long. Even on the backs they kind of look pretty cool, you know, I mean, I still like it. It's where the tea and the coffee has gone underneath the paper and then baked onto it, basically. You get these lovely sort of, almost these like fractal blemishes on the paper. They just look really cool. So you could stop here if that's what you wanted to do. Your paper is successfully aged. However, we've got some more tricks up our sleeves, friends. Here we go. We have 2 stacks of aged up paper, tea and coffee. Now I don't know if you can see that, but I think that the tea flavour paper is kind of a bit warmer to look at. It's a little bit friendlier, kind of looks a bit nicer, in my esteemed opinion. I kind of prefer the way that it's the tea has mottled the paper. Even in the bits where it's stuck on the edge of the pan, kind of looks a bit nicer than the coffee. The coffee feels a little bit grittier. That's quite nice. But these last 2 ones that I did kind of came out a bit weird. Not in a bad way. They just kind of look like they've been left in a cold, damp monastery for a long time. That's okay though. I'm just straightening out my bits of paper. I'm not doing anything sort of crazy. I've got this like weird hole punchy bit where I pulled them out of the little sketchbook I was using. Unfortunately, I thought the perforations would be good enough to just trim everything off. However, some of them have gone a bit awry. That's what you get for buying cheap notebooks, I guess. Here we are. Now you can leave your sheets of paper as that if that's what you want to do. That's fantastic. However, if you want to go the extra hog, my friends, stay tuned, because we're going to do some crazy stuff now. I have here some watercolour paints. I've got some tempera watercolour paints which really have seen better days, as you can see. These are pretty cheap little paint palettes. They usually come in a tin, which is currently homing some of my better watercolour paintbrushes. And I've also got my nicer watercolour paints. I think this is burnt sienna, these ones are yellow ochre, and that one, not sure what that one is, brown. It's another ochre type thing. My watercolour paint set is a bit of a state, as you can see, but we're going to be mostly using these. The tempera paints are kind of grittier, they come out a bit more chalky, very much more opaque than the proper watercolours, and yeah, that will affect how you write on the paper, so use with caution. So here goes. I'm going to take some of my nicer watercolour first, show off how that works. You can really use it kind of as a, almost like a stain almost, just to give it a little bit more oomph. Give your pages a little bit more detail. I'm going to use mine to darken down the edges. I've got some friends who only use watercolours to age up their papers, and their letters always look fantastic, but unfortunately for me it's a little bit too expensive and I prefer to use the tea. Something else that I quite enjoy doing with my papers when I'm writing letters is I like to sort of speckle them, and this is something that's definitely best done with paint rather than tea, because once you know where it is, you know it's going to stay there. What I like to do is I like to get quite a lot of water, mix up the paint nice and nice and good. Get it quite heavily pigmented. Have a little bit of that darker brown in there as well. Put it there. And then just get your paintbrush. And what you're going to do is you're going to do a sort of flicking motion with your finger, or with a piece of card, or whatever else. But and lo and behold, you have a speckly piece of paper. Perhaps the subtle speckle is not your jam. This is fine, because oh boy, have I got a good thing for you next. In a similar vein to our previous one, what we can also do is we can mix up quite a thin wash. Lots of paint. Here, you see that? It's quite, I've got quite a thick brush, so it's dense brush, so it pulls in lots of the moisture. And what I'm going to do is just going to tap it over this page so we get some bigger blobs. Bit of another colour. You can also just shake your brush. Now this one, I'll compare it to the last one, which I've actually gotten some of the splodges on this one on there. But here you go. This was the fine flicky. This, much wetter paint, much bigger splodges. You see? How cool. You could use this if you're playing a particularly savage type of character. Imagine it in red. I wonder what it could be. Now I shall show you some with the tempera paints. I'm going to do this basically a couple of the same things, just with the tempera rather than the... So here we are. We have some bits for you to compare. We've got tempera, watercolour, tempera, watercolour, tempera, watercolour. And I've left you some sheets plain as well. These are the tea stained ones. I think they look better. So I've left those ones for you to experiment and play with, and these ones as examples and stuff for you to write on. I've done both sides of each sheet, yeah, for your enjoyment. The last thing that I want to talk about is the in-character portion of aging your paper or your letters, or personalising your letters. There's loads of things that you can do to give your letters and things that you write an in-character flair. For example, you could spray them with perfume, or you could maybe leave little rings from the bottom of your tankard or your cup on the letter, things like that. Do what your character would do. Maybe change your handwriting, all sorts of things that you can make your characters feel immersive in letter form or writing form. Anyway, this is Andy giving you some inspiration for aging your paper. See you tomorrow. Bye!